staring down death in the form of a Fall Out Boy flyer. What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we are going to talk about returning to normal, going to shows again. It's been over a year without shows, and although we're not going to get a true summer tour and festival season like we usually do, things are finally starting to kind of sort of get back to normal, and we are starting to see signs of life on the live events side of things. There's Knotfest, Riot Fest, Furnace Fest, the Blue Ridge Rock Festival, tours from Slipknot, Deftones, All Time Low, MGK, and many more. And that is what we're going to talk about in this video. First, I want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an online community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. You can explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. They've got tons of classes on topics around creativity and entrepreneurship, like YouTube success with MKBHD, hand lettering with Jessica Hish. If I had to point to one particular class, it would be Context is Key, Social Media Strategy in a Noisy Online World with Gary Vaynerchuk. And the main takeaway here being the idea of jabs and right hook. Jabs are the social media posts that get your audience's attention and engagement, and then right hooks are when you ask them to actually buy something, and it's about balancing those two things. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, meaning that there's no ads and they're always launching new premium classes, so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. The first one that caught my eye was Knotfest, which is, as everybody probably knows, Slipknot's festival they do every year in Iowa. The lineup for this one is actually pretty interesting. They've got Slipknot, Faith No More, Megadeth, Lamb of God, Suicide Boys, Gojira, Trivium, Tech Nine, Fever 333, Knocked Loose, Turnstile, Gate Creeper, and Vended. A couple things that I thought were pretty interesting there. Number one, Faith No More as like the co-headliner. Kind of interesting, like it does make sense, but on the other hand, they're definitely less in the kind of metal world than Slipknot is, so that was kind of surprising to me, but I would imagine there's a lot of overlap in fan bases there, so, it works. What really caught my eye was Suicide Boys. Number one, that they are even on this at all, and number two, that they were as high up on the bill as they are. Same for Tech Nine. Maybe not quite as big as Suicide Boys, but I think another good choice of a rap artist that has a lot of crossover with rock fans. There's a lot of like Corey Taylor boomer energy out there among their fan base, so I would imagine they'll take a little bit of heat for that, but I think it's cool. And Gojira, they are a very interesting band to me because they're like shockingly big. I think they have like 2 million Spotify listeners or something. Tons of songs with hundreds of millions of streams. They play super high on all these festivals, and they're a very good band, so I do get the appeal, but what I don't understand is how they've gotten this big. They're not like super big personalities. They're not like great at social media. As far as I know, none of their videos have ever like gone super viral. They're not controversial. Their music is very good, but it's not like necessarily anything super amazing, but they kill it. So good for them. The next festival, the big giant granddaddy of all of them, is Hellfest. Easily the most ridiculous lineup I have ever seen in my entire life, and probably the craziest lineup we will ever see. It's 9 days long, 6 stages, with over 350 bands. I did not stutter, 350 bands. This is insane. It's like they've got the main stage, which is kind of the, mainstream rock stage with Deftones, Faith No More, Avenged Sevenfold, Scorpions, Nine Inch Nails, Guns N' Roses, and Metallica. They've got like the punk stage, I guess, with like Suicidal Tendencies, Walls of Jericho, Rise Against, Bad Religion, Exploited, Hatebreed, the extreme metal stage or death metal stage, whatever, with Obituary, Sepultura, Therion, Decapitated, Catatonia, Carcass, the black metal stage with Mayhem, Watain, Enslaved, and Merciful Fate. That was always like the hard part of Warped Tour to me, is having to track down a schedule, pay somebody like $5 for a piece of paper, and then like be like, oh, Breathe Carolina is playing at this time, and then Less Than Jake's playing at this time, and if we leave here, we can get there by that time, and it makes it a little bit easier to have things chunked out like this. But that being said, to me, this is just too much. Like 7 days or 9 days or whatever it is way, way, way too much time. Did we really need all these bands? Like, is anybody gonna miss it if we left off Rectal Smegma, the Atomic Bitch Wax, or Ugly Kid Joe? Probably not. The next one is the Louder Than Life Festival in Louisville, Kentucky. I don't know a whole lot about this one. It's a fairly standard kind of festival lineup with, you know, your typical 2000s and 90s artists at the top, like Korn, Stained, and Cypress Hill headlining the first day. Friday is Metallica, Jane's Addiction, and Rise Against. You know, with the exception of Rise Against, that whole lineup is something that I could have seen in high school, and I graduated in 96. Saturday is Nine Inch Nails, Snoop Dogg, and Machine Gun Kelly. Again, two 90s artists, but I think it's pretty interesting that Machine Gun Kelly has already made this much headway in the rock scene that he can be on the same line as Nine Inch Nails and Snoop. And some newer folks like Ghostemane, and also my friend Jeris Johnson. This is like the perfect festival for him. He is the exact intersection of everything on this bill, of like rap and butt rock and metal. That's Jeris in a nutshell, so I think this is the perfect home for him, and I'm excited to see what he looks like on stage at a big festival like this. Also, speaking of Louisville, or as the locals say it, like Louisville, it holds a little bit of a special place in my heart because it was the very first time that I ever did cocaine, and one of the like grossest, weirdest moments of my life. I was with a friend of mine who played in a pretty well-known 90s straight edge band that I won't name. For whatever reason, we decided we were gonna go do coke, and he took us to this random girl's house that he knew. Actually, she was probably like 35 or something, and we go into like, you know, the bedroom of her like dingy, shitty apartment. She's already all gacked out. Before she'll like give us the 8-ball that we bought, she forced us to watch Metallica on this like 12-inch TV VCR combo with that like super intense coke energy, like, oh, you guys gotta watch this part. And mind you, this was like 2005. No, this is like 2009. So watching Metallica on VHS was weird enough on its own, coupled with the fact that I was buying an 8-ball from some random girl in Kentucky, and it was a night that we shall forever remember. And next up, the Sad Summer Fest, which is kind of, sort of, almost feels like it would have been a successor to Warped Tour because it's sponsored by Journeys. I don't know how much of a festival it really is. It is all-time low. The story so far, the main movements, Grayscale and Destroy Boys. Maybe there's something missing. Maybe there's more artists here that I didn't see, but that feels to me more like a tour than it does a festival. Also, the flyer is interesting. It has like carnival rides and stuff on it. Makes me feel like I'm gonna go to a county fair and play those like super unfair carnival games where you're supposed to throw a ball into a slot, but the slot doesn't actually fit the ball and the ball is lopsided. So there's like a 1 in 10,000 chance that you'll win the big green stuffed parrot or whatever. And next up, we have the festival that I am personally most interested and excited in, Furnace Fest. For those who aren't familiar, Furnace Fest, the original one, I think was in 2001, something like that. It was like 20 years ago in Alabama, and they called it Furnace Fest because they had it at like an abandoned or, you know, decommissioned like metal work plant or whatever, where they had actual furnaces. I don't remember the old lineups off the top of my head, but they were awesome. A lot of those like, you know, tooth and nail kind of bands. They did, I think, 4 of them or something, and then, you know, life happened and they had other priorities in their life. They decided to bring it back for a 20th anniversary or something like that in 2020, except COVID happened, that all went out the window, and now they're bringing it back for 2021 with what is, in my opinion, the best festival lineup of all time, probably the best that will ever be. And by the way, if you're interested in hearing the story and kind of a lot of the details about how all this came together, I did a podcast with the 2 guys behind Furnace Fest, so you can check that out at the link in the description to my podcast. It's a really good conversation. But anyway, the big headliners, it's 3 days, are Under Oath, Taking Back Sunday, and Killswitch Engage. Some of the other bands that you might recognize and be excited about are, well, basically everybody on the lineup, but Converge, Defeater, 18 Visions, Emery, Every Time I Die, Terror, Thursday, Walls of Jericho, Zao. This is just ridiculous. Like, they literally got every cool band that I would want to see. Kind of 2 things that I'm excited about here. Number one, a lot of these bands that kind of didn't really ever break through or kind of get the success that they probably deserved back then, you know, like Hopes Fall, Living Sacrifice, Boy Sets Fire, Cave In, bands that really kind of, I don't know if struggled is the right word, but probably did struggle back then. I mean, none of those bands ever made a dime, I'm sure. But after that, went on to become these like really highly regarded legendary bands. Now they're getting a chance to shine, kind of come back and experience, I think, the love that they've built up over time, so that's pretty cool to see. And next up, Lollapalooza. Huge lineup here. I think it's like 3, maybe 4 days. It's Foo Fighters, Post Malone, Tyler the Creator, Miley Cyrus, DaBaby, Marshmello, Illenium, Journey, Megan Thee Stallion, Roddy Ricch, Brockhampton, Playboi Carti, Young Thug, Limp Bizkit, Modest Mouse, Steve Aoki, Jimmy Eat World, Suicide Boys, All Time Low, Ian Dior, Angels and Airwaves, Rico Nasty, JPEG Mafia, Olivia O'Brien, Flo Milli, Sullivan King, and like 50 other artists. It is a really good lineup, but you know, it kind of just doesn't really feel like Lollapalooza to me. And I say that as somebody that went to the first 3. I think it was 91, 92, 93 were the first 3, which were really cool tours at the time. And the reason I say that, like, this feels to me almost more like a slightly edgier Coachella. Like maybe there's a little bit too much indie and sort of mainstream rap on this to feel like Coachella to me, or to feel like Lollapalooza rather, because Lollapalooza was the thing that really put alternative culture on the map. This is when they had like Jane's Addiction with Rollins Band and Susie and the Banshees and Ice-T and Living Colour all on the same stage. None of that stuff was mainstream at all. And I think if there's like one thing that to me kicked off like that whole wave of 90s alternative culture, I would say that it's Lollapalooza. It got a ton of press coverage. It was a big deal. It introduced me to a lot of that stuff. And so, you know, I understand why the lineup is what it is, but to me, it's a little bit of a bummer to lose that. I mean, you know, you've got Post Malone, DaBaby, Roddy Ricch, and Jack Harlow, for example, which I think are great artists, but you know, is that really Lollapalooza? That they could be on Rolling Loud, right? And it's not the fact that they're rappers, because rap has always been part of Lollapalooza. For example, they had Ice-T, Cypress Hill, Arrested Development, Booyah Tribe. Like rap has always been a significant part of Lollapalooza. So it's not that, it's just that these are like very mainstream kind of pop rappers that I think don't really have much of a tie to alternative culture other than Post Malone maybe. But with that said, we do also have Tyler the Creator as one of the headliners, and he is a perfect example of what Lollapalooza would be in my opinion. I made a whole video about him and Odd Future and how much they've contributed to alternative culture, so I won't repeat all that, but he is exactly the kind of person who should be headlining Lollapalooza in my opinion, so that's cool to see. Couple other smaller, newer artists that are interesting to see are Jaden and Ian Dior, both of which are, you know, part of this new wave of like TikTok pop punk, I guess you would say. Kim Petras, also a big fan of hers. Oliver Tree, Princess Nokia, and Rico Nasty, that's pretty cool to see. And Riot Fest. I think that these are the correct dates. As I recall, it's been like rescheduled a bit and stuff, but September 16th through 19th in Chicago. And the lineup, it's headlined by 9 Inch Nails, Smashing Pumpkins, and Run the Jewels, with Pixies, Faith No More, Devo, Mr. Bungle, Coheed and Cambria, Taking Back Sunday, Dirty Heads, Sublime with Rome, Lupe Fiasco, Vic Mensa, NoFX, Newfound Glory, Circle Jerks, Simple Plan, Dinosaur Jr., The Ghost Inside, Gogol Bordello, Motion City Soundtrack, Thrice, Circus Survive, blah, 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 blah. You know, actually reading this now, my first thought was, okay, now that feels like a Lollapalooza lineup to me. Literally 9 Inch Nails and Smashing Pumpkins and Faith No More I saw in like the 90s when I was in high school, and they're still headlining fests, so that's a little bit disappointing to see, but it is what it is. Cool to see some rap on here too. You know, Lupe Fiasco and Run the Jewels and Vic Mensa are not the kind of rap that I enjoy. It's a little bit too NPR, backpacky, you know, blue checkmark kind of rap for me, but I get it. That probably makes sense for this audience. As far as newer artists go, I see Meet Me at the Altars on here and Kenny Hoopla. I would say all in all, a solid lineup. And next up, one that I'm very interested in, the Blue Ridge Rock Festival. That is September 9th through 12th. The headliners are Breaking Benjamin, A Day to Remember, The Ghost Inside, Hailstorm, and Skillet on the first day, Rob Zombie, Limp Bizkit, Rise Against, I Prevail, and Chevelle on Friday, Five Finger Death Punch, Megadeth, Lamb of God, and Seether on Saturday, and on Sunday, Shinedown, Papa Roach, and an unannounced special guest. And also it says it's hosted by Steve-O. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm a Steve-O fan, especially now that he's sober, and the reason it's interesting to me is because it is apparently totally fan driven. So for months they've been posting these brackets of artists that the fans vote on, and then they actually book whoever wins the face-off. So that's cool because we get to see exactly what the fans actually pick. Some of the smaller or newer artists that are interesting to see on here are like Spite. Interesting to see someone like Brand of Sacrifice on here, you know, super heavy deathcore band, which you typically don't see on these sort of festivals, so that's interesting. Tala is on there too, which is a really cool like nu metal band. Currents is on here. Jelly Roll, the country rapper guy. All in all, a little bit too radio rock for my personal taste, but I think it's a great lineup overall, and I really like that fan-chosen aspect of it. And also, I don't know what this exactly means, but they said they have on-site club experience with Ludacris and Lil Jon. You guys know how much I love the mid-2000s, so if you want to find me at Blue Ridge Rock Festival, I'm gonna be kicking back a cold can of crunk juice with Lil Jon and Ludacris. Next up, Inkarceration Music and Tattoo Festival, which is September 10th through 12th in Mansfield, Ohio at the Ohio State Reformatory. So kind of a play on words here. Inkarceration. The lineup here is Slipknot, Mudvayne, and Rob Zombie headlining. Underneath them on Friday, we have Mastodon, Killswitch Engage, Steel Panther, and The Who. On Saturday, we have A Day to Remember, Chevelle, Asking Alexandria, and Pop Evil. On Sunday, we've got Hailstorm, Beartooth, Motionless in White, and Fever 333. So we're starting to see a lot of the same names pop up on the summer festival circuit, which is not a bad thing, but it is kind of interesting. Slipknot and Rob Zombie makes total sense to me as headliners, but Mudvayne is interesting. You know, they've been gone for what, 15 years or something like that. Came back this year and now they're headlining. They're on the same level as Rob Zombie and Slipknot. That's a band that I thought was, you know, pretty decent when their first album came out. I definitely don't really understand why people just worship the band to the extent that they do. I mean, this is like Deftones level verbal diarrhea every time you mention Mudvayne. But either way, good for them. Obviously, they're doing something that people love and care about. So good for them for leveraging that into headlining slots in these festivals and probably making a lot of money. Can't fault anybody for getting the bag. Some of the smaller / newer artists on here that are interesting to me are The Who, Bad Flower, and Ice Nine Kills. Also got Spite again. A lot of bands I have never heard of with very early 2000s names like Silent Theory and Saving Escape. Harmless Habit. Interesting to see Crown the Empire on here and also seeing them as high as they are. I felt like they kind of fell off a few years ago, but you know, they're up there with August Burns Red and Bad Omens, so that's not too bad. Asking Alexandria is also on here. Kind of interesting to see them like transform us from a scene band into just like a pure Red State butt rock festival band over the years. But again, I can't fault them for that. I'm sure it's a lot more fun playing these things than it is grinding it out, you know, still playing the same venues you did 10 years ago, so I can't fault them for that. One thing that they didn't really talk about is the tattoo side of this. Given how many like 90s and 2000s bands are on this, I'm hoping that your tattoo options are limited to one or two things: a tribal armband or nautical star tattoos on your shoulders. There's a whole bunch more festivals, but I'm not going to list all of them. Those are the ones that kind of caught my eye. I thought I would also talk about some of the tours coming up. Again, there's a million of these, but a few of the ones that were interesting to me were All Time Low, Nothing Nowhere, and Meet Me at the Altar. I really like this lineup. You got All Time Low, which are, you know, the biggest names in pop punk right now, I would say. Been around for 20 years now, with Nothing Nowhere, who he's been doing really well for himself over the past few years, so it's cool to see him on this tour. And also Meet Me at the Altar, who I think have only been around for like a year or two or something. They formed as an internet band that had never met each other at first, and now they're on Fueled by Ramen. They're touring with All Time Low. I mean, they're doing it, so that's pretty cool to see. Also, the Deftones, Gojira, and Poppy tour, which was rescheduled from earlier in the year. I'm not sure if these are the correct dates, so don't quote me on that, but it is interesting to see. And I find it interesting that Poppy has kind of chosen to align herself with this audience, you know, as opposed to, say, the alternative pop or hyper pop kind of world, the Dorian Electra, Charlie XCX kind of world. I think a lot of people were thinking that she would go that direction, but from what I understand, she just doesn't really have any interest in that stuff, especially her newer stuff. Really hope to see big things from her soon. Next up, another big one we have is the Hella Mega Tour with Green Day, Fall Out Boy, and Weezer. This is in Australia. Looks like it's only 6 dates, but it's all stadiums. That's pretty cool. The sad part about this to me is that, like, I think of this as like relatively new bands, but then you think about it, Green Day's been around for what, 35 years or something. They started in 1987. Fall Out Boy is like 20 years old. Weezer's been around since the early 90s or something. And you know, the sad reality is that this is dad rock, which makes me dad rock age, because, you know, I was really like in the prime audience for all these bands, and that just doesn't feel good to realize. Staring down death in the form of a Fall Out Boy flyer. MGK is also going out with Jaden and Kenny Hoopla. So this to me is like the definitive new generation TikTok pop punk revival kind of tour. I'm interested to see how well Jaden does live. Kenny Hoopla, I'm pretty sure has been in bands, so I have no real questions about his ability to perform live. But the thing with a lot of these like emo rappers and TikTokers is that a lot of them have never played shows before. Most of them are not in bands. They're good at being on camera, but being on camera and having control of a crowd are two very different things. I've seen a lot of these like emo rappers that did great numbers online just kind of eat shit and play very badly live because, you know, their first tour was like the second time they'd ever played a show. Waterparks is also doing some UK dates. I know that they've had to reschedule that a bit and stuff. Very excited for them. Austin is a friend of mine. Love what they're doing. Love the new album. 21 Pilots is also going out again with my good friend Sky from Issues on bass. Very cool to see. Sky is one of the best fucking musicians in the entire scene in any genre. The dude is fucking incredible, and having him in your band will 100% of the time make it sound better. So I think it's cool to hear what they sound like with him in the band, and I hope I get a chance to check them out. We've also got Architects. They've announced a US and Canada tour. It doesn't say who's supporting, at least not that I can find. I'm not sure why, but it's cool to see them playing some big rooms like the Fillmore. It's like 2,000 capacity. So seeing a relatively new metalcore band, even though they're, I guess, probably almost 20 years old now, but, you know, relatively new by metalcore standards in the world in which Scorpions still headline festivals, being only 15 or 20 years old is pretty new. So that's cool to see. And lastly, I don't know the name of it, but there's this tour with the Pop Punk's Not Dead tour. That's what it is. With Good Charlotte, Simple Plan, and Newfound Glory, which got rescheduled, but I think it's coming back. Again, this one just makes me sad because I love all these bands. I read this interview with them. They did like a Zoom hangout thing. I read kind of the highlights of it, and they're all like, man, we're in our 40s. How did that happen? And that's kind of how I feel too. You know, I'm 42 and I love all those bands, and it's just kind of, you know, where does the time go? And can you still be in your 40s playing pop punk? I guess you can. Nothing wrong with that. It's just kind of tough to look in the mirror and realize that you got old. It sucks. But, you know, to be honest, I wouldn't take it back. Like, if you offered me the opportunity to be 23 again, I don't think I would do it. I was not happy when I was 23. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I don't think anybody knows what they're doing when they're 23. So if I had to choose between being 42 and 23, I'm happier now. I like my life a lot better now. So it's all good. And I think this is an awesome tour. So I don't know, maybe I'll go check it out. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. Let me know what you think about these tours and festivals. Let me know in the comments which ones you are most excited about. Let me know your thoughts about the lineups on these, about kind of the dynamics between what works in America versus Europe. Let me know all of that in the comments. Before I let you go, I wanted to mention two things. Number one, my merch. I've got this Pop Punk with Breakdowns shirt, this Neon Cartoon Monster shirt by the legend Michael Shantz, and I've got this MySpace deathcore inspired design complete with an edgy slogan in impact font on the back. You can get all those at the link in the description. And as always, I want to thank everybody who supports us on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. It is because of your support that we're able to do the podcast. That's how I pay our producer and editor. So patrons get every podcast a week early. There's a members only private Discord server that I'm in all the time. I do giveaways, Q&As. There's a way to have me review your music or artwork or videos or anything else that you might want to check out. So you can support us on Patreon at the link in the description if you're interested. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.